Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into one of the most absolutely fascinating character studies in human history. We're looking at Plutarch's incredibly complex portrait of Julius Caesar. Now, this explainer is all about a man who started from, well, pretty modest political beginnings and ended up completely reshaping the world stage. And in the process, he literally broke the Roman Republic. You know, Plutarch doesn't just hand us a dry timeline of battles here. He gives us an absolute masterclass in human ambition. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this because this right here is the monumental question we're trying to answer today. How exactly does a system that stood strong for half a millennium just crumble under the weight of one single person? We're going to trace a chronological, fundamentally tragic arc today. We'll watch this guy transform from a daring young patrician into a ruthless conqueror and ultimately into a monarch in everything but the name. But before we trace that rise, consider this staggering paradox. Was Julius Caesar a savior or was he a tyrant? Plutarch presents a man of just profound dualities. I mean, here's a leader famous for his magnanimity, a man who actually pardoned his most bitter Civil War enemies. Yet, as we'll see, he's the exact same man responsible for the deaths of 1 million people in Gaul. Plutarch handles this with remarkable restraint, actually. He doesn't condemn him and he doesn't exalt him. He simply lays out the deeds and asks us to weigh the moral cost of Caesar's monumental actions.
All right, Section 1, the audacious young patrician. So born into an ancient but, honestly, politically weak family, Caesar was determined to rise. And his sheer audacity, it was incredibly obvious right from the get-go. Plutarch tells this famous story of a young Caesar getting captured by Cilician pirates. The pirates demanded a ransom of 20 talents. Now get this, Caesar actually laughed right in their faces and told them they clearly didn't know who they'd captured. He demanded they ask for 50 talents instead. And while his retinue scrambled to go raise this massive sum, Caesar just hung out with the pirates. Literally, he lived with them as a guest, shared their food, read them his poetry, and cheerfully promised that as soon as he was free, well, he'd have them all crucified. Naturally, the pirates thought he was just making some morbid joke. He was not. The very second his ransom was paid and he was released, Caesar immediately raised a small fleet, hunted down those exact pirates, captured them, and carried out his promise to the letter. This perfectly establishes Caesar's defining psychological baseline right from the start. At just 25 years old, he was already the kind of man who would say a terrifying thing with a polite smile and then flawlessly execute it.
Moving right along to Section 2, the climb to power. So the crucial point is, to climb the Roman political ladder, Caesar borrowed heavily to fund public games. Like, heavily. This left him massively in debt and politically desperate. So how did he navigate this danger? Well, he didn't play by the traditional rules. Instead, in 60 BC, he totally bypassed the system by forming what we call the First Triumvirate. Now, this wasn't some official government body, it was a private, informal, behind-closed-doors alliance that essentially hacked the Roman Republic. Just look at the mechanics of this alliance. It's wild. You had Pompey, easily the most successful and renowned general of the previous generation, bringing unmatched military clout. Then you had Crassus, literally the richest man in Rome, bringing limitless wealth. And you had Caesar, who provided the ruthless political execution. As consul in 59 BC, Caesar pushed through laws to give land to Pompey's veterans. He locked down lucrative tax contracts for Crassus. And, most importantly for our story, he secured a 5-year military command in Gaul for himself. Which brings us to Section 3, the Gallic War.
8. That is the number of years he spent campaigning continuously north of the Roman frontier. Starting with just 4 legions, he fought the Helvetii, the Germans, crossed the Rhine twice, and even invaded Britain twice. This unbroken stretch of just relentless, brutal warfare, it transformed Caesar. He went from an indebted, cunning politician into a hardened, fiercely capable conqueror. But that transformation, it came at an unimaginably dark price. 1 million. According to Plutarch's figures, during those 8 years, Caesar killed perhaps 1 million people and enslaved 1 million more. I mean, to put that into perspective, it is a horrifying scale of ambition. The human cost of his rise to unparalleled power is truly staggering to comprehend. But the Gallic War achieved exactly what Caesar needed it to. He paid off every single one of those massive debts. He built a private fortune that rivaled the entire Roman treasury. He added a vast new province to the state that would remain Roman for 500 years. But most critically, he forged an army of veteran soldiers whose primary loyalty was no longer to the Roman Senate, but personally to Julius Caesar. Section 4. Crossing the Rubicon.
Okay, we are now at 50 BC. Caesar's command in Gaul is ending, and his enemies in the Senate are gearing up to strike. This builds into an impossible standoff. The Senate, which is now controlled by Caesar's enemies and his formerly close ally Pompey, demands that Caesar disband his loyal army and return to Rome as a private citizen to face legal prosecution. Caesar knows full well that returning without his army means total political and likely literal destruction. So he refuses. The Senate officially declares him a public enemy. Pompey has effectively cornered him into a binary choice here. Submit to your own ruin or march your army on your own city.
And this brilliantly illustrates the tension of the moment. The Rubicon was this small stream that marked the legal boundary between Caesar's province and Italy. By law, crossing it with an army was an irreversible act of treason and civil war. Plutarch tells us Caesar stood right at the riverbank, wavering, deeply weighing the catastrophic greatness of the enterprise. After a long, tense moment of hesitation, he finally declared, "The die is cast," and hurried his troops across. The point of no return was officially breached. What followed was a lightning-fast 4-year civil war. Caesar chased Pompey all the way to Greece and decisively defeated him at Pharsalus. Pompey fled to Egypt where, plot twist, he was unexpectedly murdered by courtiers. Caesar pursued him there, famously establishing Cleopatra on the Egyptian throne. He then systematically wiped out Pompey's remaining supporters in Africa and Spain. By 45 BC, Caesar stood completely alone as the sole master of the Roman world. Let's look at Section 5, Dictator for Life. Returning to Rome, Caesar took on the title Dictator Perpetuo. He was essentially a king without a crown, which was an absolutely intolerable concept for the aristocracy. But here's the paradox Plutarch highlights. Caesar actually used this absolute illegal power incredibly effectively. I mean, he implemented the Julian calendar, which we essentially still use today. He reorganized the corrupt courts, secured land for veterans, reformed the grain dole, and extended Roman citizenship to provincials. He was efficiently fixing deep systemic problems that the Republic had been totally incapable of solving for decades. It really complicates our moral judgment, doesn't it? Because, in a way, he broke the state to fix the state. And that leads us into Section 6, the Ides of March. Taking the office of dictator for life was ultimately a death sentence. It led to a massive conspiracy, spearheaded by Marcus Brutus, a man Caesar had famously pardoned, and someone who took his ancestral mythology very seriously. On March 15th, 44 BC, the notorious Ides of March, Caesar attended a Senate meeting in the theater of Pompeii. The conspirators totally surrounded him, pretending to present a petition, and then, suddenly, they drew their daggers. He was hemmed in on all sides in a chaotic, bloody frenzy. He was struck 23 times. Plutarch records this absolutely heart-stopping detail. Caesar fought back against his attackers at first, shifting from side to side. But then he saw Brutus. When he saw Brutus, the man he had pardoned, with his sword drawn, Caesar just stopped fighting. He pulled his toga over his face and fell. According to Plutarch, his tragic final words were in Greek, "Kai su teknon," meaning, "You too, my son?" Shakespeare later Latinized this into "et tu, Brute," but the betrayal hits just as hard either way. He collapsed right at the blood-stained foot of the statue of Pompey, his old rival. Now, the assassins genuinely believed that killing the tyrant would magically revive the Republic. Well, they were completely wrong. The Republic did not revive. Instead, Caesar's death plunged the Roman world into even more devastating civil wars. Brutus and Cassius perished at Philippi in 42 BC. Antony and Cleopatra fell at Actium in 31 BC. In the end, it was Caesar's great-nephew, Augustus, who emerged victorious, becoming the very monarch the assassins had tried to prevent. The Republic was officially dead. Which brings us right back to our central question. Was Julius Caesar a visionary savior who saw that a broken system needed absolute reform? Or was he a ruthless tyrant who destroyed a 500-year-old democracy just for his own glory? Interestingly, Plutarch originally wrote a comparison essay at the end of this chapter, but it's been lost to history. So the ultimate judgment is left to you. Weigh the undeniable brilliance against the horrifying cost. Consider what this tells us about the nature of power and ambition even today, and ask yourself, what is the true price of greatness? Thanks so much for exploring this explainer with me today. I highly encourage you to dive even deeper into the source material. It's absolutely worth your time. See you next time.